how to make your own sea turtle molded concrete stepping stones. Now this is a two-part video. On the first part, we're just going to cover how we carved out the plug for the mold. And in the second video, I'm going to show you how we actually made the mold and poured the concrete stepping stones. So I cut the plug out. I just drew it out and then cut out the outline with a jigsaw. I set the jigsaw on a little bit of an angle so that the sides are not straight. You want the end result to be a little bit smaller on the top than the bottom of the wood so that the mold can come off of this plug very easily. So I cut out the outline with a jigsaw, and then the main tool for this job is going to be an angle grinder with a flap sanding wheel. I use a coarse grit. Anything in the 60 grit range works really nicely. And this allows me to carve very quickly, but still have control, over the amount of material that the flap sanding wheel is removing. Now, because this is a stepping stone, I really don't want to carve down the wings, or the flappers all that much. I want to keep as much flat surface as possible. I'm just kind of making lines of demarcation so that visually the fins look, different or separate from the shell. So I'm just kind of a steep angle cut in along the lines that distinguish the shell from the fins, while keeping as much of the flat surface as possible. I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the shell. You want to have the details of the different segments of the shell, and I'm just doing that with a fairly steep angle, just grinding right along the lines. And I'm achieving that while still leaving as much flat surface as possible so that it's a usable stepping stone that people aren't going to be tripping on. You also want to make sure that all of these grooves are deep enough so that they're going to show up on the finished product. Now, the finished product of the stepping stone is going to be a mirror image of this plug. Now, to shape the head, I'm just keeping the same thing in mind. When I'm doing the sides, I want to taper it a little bit so that it's narrower at the top than it is at the bottom. And I want to keep as much flat surface on the head also. So for the beak, all I'm doing is cutting in with the edge of that flap sanding wheel and just rounding it over slightly. Now this is the first time I attempted to mold something this large, and I did run in. It was a bit of a learning curve. I actually molded I tried to build the mold a couple of times and failed. And when I finally ended up I tried foam spray from Home Depot. That did not work. I tried actually fiberglass, which I really thought would work, but it didn't. It had some imperfections, in the glass, some air bubbles in the glass. And I finally went to a silicone mold material, and that really did the trick. And I'll show you how I built the mold box and poured the silicone, etc., on video number 2. Now for the detail on the eyes, I just used a Dremel grinder with a little Dremel tool. You can go as crazy as you want with this stuff, but for a stepping stone, really you just need a visual representation of the eye that's going to stand out in the concrete. You can see the line running through the wood. I used 2x12s and I just glued them together with a Bondo. I actually used the Bondo fiberglass to hold them together because the 2x12 wasn't quite big enough to get this stepping stone out of. So I needed to combine two. And these grooves that I'm putting in now are just for the neck folds of the turtle's head. Now I did go over everything with an oscillating sander, 80 grit and then a 120. And for the texture on the fins, I just used the tip of the angle grinder's flap sanding wheel and kind of plunged in and it created a nice texture, while the high areas are still providing a walking surface. I guess you could say it's a non-skid walking surface at this point. And that whole textured area really, makes the fins kind of stand out from the shell. Now, this same process will work with a bunch of different ideas. You don't have to do a sea turtle. I've seen them done with sand dollars, etc. You can probably even do a crab. And the principle is just to carve whatever you want out of wood and then make a mold from that. So now I'm done with the carving. I'm going to seal this with a wax. This is a release wax for the mold. I'll go over that on the next video, just to prevent the mold material from soaking into the wood or binding to the wood. And then we're going to create a box. We're going to attach this to a piece of plywood, build a box around it, pour the silicone mold material into that box, which will cover the entire plug. And then once that's dried sufficiently, be able to pull the mold off. This is the finished mold. You can see the details in there. I think it's going to work out nice. And then this is the finished product. This is the first concrete stepping stone I got out of it. Please like and subscribe, and check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. Thanks for watching.